I'm Louisa Barton for the Horse Talk Show here at Peterson and Smith Equine Hospital, visiting with Dr. Adam Cayot, and we're going to talk about something that is a big concern in the show and the race world, and that is the large percentage of horses that actually suffer from ulcers. And Dr. Cayot's mentioned in previous interviews horses being stalled up a lot, which obviously at the racetracks and the show facilities sometimes turnout is just not an option, and horses stalled up for long periods of time do get more anxious, and there's something in the 90th, I think, percentile or higher of horses that are competition horses, either racing or Grand Prix jumpers, whatever their sport might be, that actually get ulcers. So I'm going to talk to Dr. Cayot a little bit about that. Dr. Cayot, tell us about how many horses you see with ulcers. I'm sure it's a lot, right?
Well, I certainly treat a lot. A lot of times we don't necessarily have to. In order to definitively diagnose them, you have to stick a scope down and look at their belly, and you can look for them. But studies have shown, and you were correct, over 90% of horses that are in some sort of competition, whether it be racing, showing, whatever, have some sort of gastric ulceration. That's 9 out of 10 at least, So chances are, if you suspect it, it's probably there. And it's certainly, even if the horse doesn't have ulcers, even if you put it on the medication for ulcers, it's not going to hurt it. So what does a horse with ulcers look like? They can look like a lot of things. There's no one, oh yeah, that horse has ulcers kind of deal. They can be inappetent and colicky. That might be the most extreme. They can be cranky, don't want to do their job. They can be what we call cinchy, where you go to put the saddle on, they pin their ears, and they do this stuff, They can have poor performance. They don't even have to be cranky or whatever, but they can just have poor performance in whatever they're doing. Dull coat, any of those things can give you an idea that this horse may have ulcers. Depending on how severe it is, would give you an idea of how long you need to treat the horse. I typically put them on either ranitidine or omeprazole or a combination of both. And those are very good medications. Horses are meant to be out grazing all day. The saliva that they produce when they're eating is a buffer. And so as they swallow that saliva, it buffers the acids that are in the stomach that cause these things. When they're just standing in the stall, not eating on anything, just standing around, those acids are still working in the gut. And when they're fed, 2-3 times a day, and they're just hanging out in the stall, the horses get used to that happening. Production increases of the acids at those times. So then they get this high concentration of acid at feeding time, and then they're done eating, and those acids are still there, So it can make it, a problem. The more the horse can be foraging, grazing, producing that saliva throughout the day, the less likely that is to happen. That's why you see it in your performance horses, or your show horses and your race horses, because just given their job, they're in a stall a lot. You don't see it as much in horses that are turned out, brood mares, that sort of thing. Granted, their life is pretty easy and not as stressful too, but they're eating all day long. They're doing what a horse is supposed to do, and so you certainly see that less. Ulcers can be a real problem. I mean, it can be fatal if it gets to that point to where.
Can it really? I didn't have any idea of that.
Absolutely, it can if the ulceration in the stomach perforates the stomach or does something like that, and that has happened, So, and it'll happen in foals. I mean, you'll get foals that will have ulcers and that will perforate, and that's where you actually see it the most. So,
do they think that it's genetic? I mean, can it be that if it's very strong in a certain family line or breed, that you might see it more?
I don't know that there's any tie to that. There may be, I mean, certainly we all know our horses, and some are more high-strung than others, and some are more worrywarts than others. I don't know that there's any genetic tie to it, and
maybe more connected to personality type.
Personality type, and what the horse is asked to do, and that's probably where I would put it. But there's genetic component in so much of everything that we don't even understand at this point. But
do you have a lot of clients who try supplementation to help the situation as well in the feed?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's all kinds. You just go to you go to the feed store, and there's all kinds of Nalox and all these things. I just say that because so there's all kinds of things out there. I don't endorse one over the other. I don't think that they'll do any harm. I don't know how much good they do, but clinically speaking or anecdotally, might help one horse. It's certainly not going to hurt them typically. So knock yourself out.
And have you seen some very extreme cases with horses in a lot of discomfort from this?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the bad ones end up colicking, and a very typical sign is they're the chronic colicker. Like, you'll be called out one week, they'll get over it, they'll be fine. Then they're colicking the next week, or the next week after that. If I treat a horse for colic and basically it gets resolved, after my treatment, and then I have to come back shortly thereafter, meaning a week or so, and treat the same symptoms again, I generally try to encourage the owner to put that horse on some sort of ulcer medication. And that's a very typical, the chronic colicker that will, that's not a cribber, that you'll see, that's very, very common. And if you tend to delve a little deeper and you ask those people about that horse, there might be some other signs, like the crankiness or the poor performance or whatever that will come up that will give you some more indication. And if you want to know for sure, then we're happy to do an endoscopic exam and prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt. Or maybe it's something else that we're going. I mean, it is possible that we go down a different road, but
the endoscopy is going to pretty conclusively tell you one way or the other. So that's a good way to get your answer. Certainly a problem in show horses, ones particularly that are not regularly turned out, and quite often there isn't an option. The horse has to be in the stall. We see that a lot in the racing world, certainly, and that's a high percentage of horses. So definitely worth checking out with your veterinarian. Peterson and Smith here in Ocala, 352-237-6151. I'm Louisa Barton for the Horse Talk Show, here with Dr. Adam Cayot.